earlier today, special counsel Jack Smith asked a federal judge to put the pause button on his case against now President-elect Donald Trump. He wants his office to assess how to move forward. Well, his request was granted earlier this afternoon, and now Smith has until December 2nd to report back to the court. Meanwhile, some on the left are running with the narrative that was pushed, quite frankly, by Vice President Kamala Harris, that she had a to-do list and Trump has an enemies list. Well, the left will view any action that the president is engaged in lawfare against him as retribution. That's where all this is going. But is it retribution or is it justice? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Chris Gacek. He's a senior fellow for regulatory affairs here at the Family Research Council. Chris, thanks for joining me. Always great to have you.
Good to be with you, Jody.
Okay. So let's start off with a quick recap. I think that's the most appropriate place for us to begin. Tell us about the cases that have been leveled against Trump over the past 4 years.
Right. So you have 2 federal cases and you have 2 state cases. Let's start with the federal cases. The first one is this the documents case down in Florida. The judge down there, probably a month or 2 ago, said that Jack Smith was inappropriately appointed to be a special counsel. So that actually is an important issue because it would apply to his appointment up here in the January, up here meaning the District Court of the District of Columbia, and would apply to this case as well. But this court hasn't ruled on it or hasn't accepted it. But anyway, you have the dismissal down there for Smith's appointment being basically illegal. All right. So I guess the Justice Department is appealing that. When Trump gets in, that case will be dead because they'll just pull the plug on that because they agree with the judge in the case. The January 6th case up here, they're trying. I'm not sure what's going on here. It looks like he's trying to ask for time and then figure out a way to dismiss the case or bail out of it. But we'll see what happens. I don't trust any of these people until the ink is dry on the documents. So then you have let's say the 2 state cases. Let's go to the Georgia case. The Georgia case is such a mess. You have this prosecutor, Fannie Willis. She's under all kinds of ethics investigations, and it's just a real, it's just a disaster. I can't imagine that that's going to proceed very long. Also, because the case, everything that was brought against Trump was essentially protected First Amendment speech, because he was essentially protesting the outcome of the election in the sense that he thought the process was bad. And I don't understand how people aren't allowed to do these sorts of things. So, and there were all sorts of other federal officials, brought into the process as well, unjustly. So we'll see what happens there, but I don't think that's going to proceed. And also a lot of the issues in that case also fall within this immunity ruling that came about from the Supreme Court. So this is another kind of a problem they've got. And that immunity ruling also would apply to the federal cases as well. So that has to be sorted out. That applies to all of them. So then it leaves us with this crazy New York case. It was kind of like a Seinfeld case, a case about nothing. Because they supposedly falsified documents, although I was never convinced that anyone in the Trump organization falsified any documents. But let's say they assume that they falsified documents. Then they kind of were always a little bit weird about what the actual crime was that the the felony that had to be tied into this crime, so that it wasn't just a misdemeanor of falsifying documents. And then what ended up happening there was that they got this, kangaroo court, and you had this conviction on it. And the sentencing is apparently going to take place on the 26th of this month. But there's also a hearing on the 12th where they're going to respond or something. The judge is going to have some kind of a response related to the immunity filings coming out of the Supreme Court decision. So we'll see what happens there. All of these cases seem to me to be just on in firm ground and are likely to be at some point tossed out. I think the one in New York, because you have this, the whole justice system is so intensely corrupt up there, and there are multiple cases of lawfare being waged against Trump, and this attorney general who's just sort of out of her mind, that they might try to pursue this thing and keep it going just to interfere with, with the administration. And so go ahead, Jody.
Yeah. So, I mean, you brought up the word lawfare. I mean, we hear that all the time, that this was lawfare, that it was all politically based and all that sort of stuff. Many think that's absolutely a fair assessment. So that comes down to the question I've posed a couple of times as I introed the program today. What are we talking about here, Chris? Is it retribution or is it justice? Has this been a politically based case of lawfare? What are we dealing with as Trump comes back in? And certainly there's going to be some discussion. Is this lawfare or retribution?
Well, one of the things I would do, I mean, honestly, given the attitude of the Trump officials, I think they're very serious about this. And one of the things that's going to happen is if they don't bail out of these things, I still think it's going to happen anyway. But there is a federal statute. It's 18 U.S.C. 241. It's called a conspiracy to deny civil rights. And I could easily imagine the new Justice Department and starting to look at this sort of coordinated effort to attack him legally on all these different sorts of issues and coordinating with it. I mean, we know that Fani Willis's boyfriend went up to the White House and charged, he billed time to go and talk to the White House counsel. So, I mean, and we haven't, we don't have the inside records. They're going to be inside the Justice Department. They're going to have access to everything, and they're going to have access to all sorts of people, right? So, if we want to go down this route, and that's federal crime, that's justice. That's not retribution. This should not have been happening. In fact, the one that really has always rankled me the worst is the documents case down in Florida, because any president is going to have probably, 1 million documents. And there's a lot to do to sort this out. You get these things, you bring them down to some location, and, there may be classified documents there. I think that whole thing was set up from the beginning, and it was just a pretty detestable thing. And it also is one of these things that is a scorched earth policy. Was that so now? What are we going to? Every president's going to be afraid of taking documents, for their presidential libraries for fear of being subject to some whimsical prosecution by the next administration that doesn't like you. So. This is a very serious thing. But let me just say, it's not about Trump, right? It's about systemic injustice. And this is where this whole conspiracy, what I just mentioned, conspiracy to design civil rights comes in. Remember, there are odd things going on all the time over there, like swatting, a person protesting outside an abortion facility. Nobody had ever done that kind of stuff before. You just sort of send them, you tell them, show up at the courthouse and we're going to, arraign you, right? Or, come down to, I mean, there's all these sorts of things that happen that are just.
Well, it ultimately all comes down to the rule of law.
Yes.
And that's what has to be protected. And it's not just what happened to Trump. I mean, we have issues on the border taking place, the DOJ, the FBI, all sorts of things that are going to have to be.
Is the law being equally applied between parties? That's the main thing. And it wasn't.
Chris Gacek, FRC's Senior Fellow for Regulatory Affairs, thank you so much for joining us.